This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is a Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined once again by my co-host, Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Pretty good, Al. Hope all is well with you as well.
Yes. Are you all dug out?
Yeah, I guess as best as can be. It sort of helps when you don't actually have to go anywhere. You know?
Yeah.
Less pressure. So.
Yeah, it is. It was brutal. This is, I guess, it's one of those careful what you wish for kind of things, because we haven't had much snow really in years, and my kids in particular have just been craving a snow day, and we got walloped. Yeah, I'm a little achy, but nevertheless, I actually enjoy this. This is like, I think, the kind of weather that really tests, like, if you are a northeasterner and even feeling achy and all that. I'll still take this over, my wife's family in Florida post stuff where it's like 90 degrees this time of year or something in Florida. And to me, that's miserable. I don't want that at all. This is what winter is supposed to look like.
I like to look at it through the window, that's for sure, through the big window in the living room. But going outside, my 3-year-old, he drags me out there. It's just not the same thrill as it was when I was, maybe like 12 years old. I don't know. I think my Mediterranean, I'm from the Northeast, but my Mediterranean ancestry just rebels against it.
I hear you. Maybe I'm just immature, and I still enjoy a good snowball fight and a snowman.
You're an Ultimate Warrior guy, so
yes,
accounting.
Always believe. Also joining us this week is PWI contributing writer. He's also our international correspondent, Walter Yeates. How's it going, Walter?
Everything's going pretty well. Actually, it snowed here in North Carolina a couple of days ago. It's already gone, so I guess it's not the same as having to shovel out a driveway, but
yeah,
winter is here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Walter is joining us for the show because we're going to be talking about our special digital exclusive issue of PWI that's available now that Walter had a big hand in. It is again only available digitally, and it is an issue dedicated to Japanese wrestling, which is really Walter's specialty. He's been covering the Japanese wrestling scene for us for about a decade now. And a big coup got an interview, a hot seat interview, exclusive with the new Japan Pro Wrestling President Takami Ohbari. Am I saying that right?
Last name is Ohbari. I actually have never heard his first name pronounced, so I'll go with you on that one.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking to Walter a bit about that interview and just overall the Japanese wrestling scene. This is kind of their busy season coming off of Wrestle Kingdom, and there's a lot going on over there. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Also, Brian and I will be talking about the Royal Rumble and what we know so far about WrestleMania, what kind of that road to WrestleMania is looking like. But real quick, let me get the plugs out of the way. For Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the latest issue is our annual Year in Wrestling, featuring this year's most popular wrestler of the year for 2020. That is Orange Cassidy on the cover, holding the plaque upside down, which I think is just hilarious. And all the achievement awards are in this issue. This is one that you don't want to miss, the Year in Wrestling, plus so much more in here. We've got our Stanley Weston Lifetime Achievement Awards. This year, there's 2 recipients, title histories, the unofficial official awards, the top 10 stories of the year. It is a great look back on a year that I think will be especially memorable in the wrestling world and outside the wrestling world. So definitely a collector's issue. And also, again, this time around, we've got another issue to plug, and it is this digital exclusive, something new that we're experimenting with here. That's also going to be available at PWI-online.com. If you are a subscriber, you would not get the digital exclusive, so you got to go and pick that up, but definitely worth getting as kind of a supplement to everything else that we do. And subscribing is the way to go. We've added a few issues to our calendar every year. We're now getting to work kind of on the WrestleMania issue. We talked last week in a kind of private meeting, some issues that we bounced around for some ideas for WrestleMania coverage. So looking forward to that. You don't want to miss any of it. So go to pwi-online.com and subscribe. You could also find links there to pick up the Pro Wrestling Illustrated line of t-shirts at prowrestlingtees.com. Please also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts and leave a positive review. We sincerely appreciate it. You can follow us on social media at official PWI on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook. I was live tweeting the Royal Rumble, and I gotta say, that was one of like sort of the nicest exchanges I've ever had. There was maybe the testament to the show not being all that controversial. I mean, there were some issues, but it was nice. Everybody got along.
Even when you made fun of Bad Bunny, you didn't.
Yeah, well, there was that, but I preemptively, predicted that they'd be calling me a boomer. So they actually, and look, I'll be the first to admit that I am way out of touch with modern pop culture music. Apparently the guy is super popular, so who am I to say? I think he did a fine job, for what he does, for his role. I think he was fine. And yeah, so let's talk about this special issue we've got, Walter. First, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background covering Japanese pro wrestling, how long you've been following it, that kind of thing?
Oh, well, as a fan, I started watching my first introduction to wrestling. I actually had a friend help me find the first match. It was a match with, I can't remember the top of it. It was a Crush and someone else from the WWF. It was back in like 1996 or 7. Help find that. I have it somewhere. I just didn't know that question was going to come up. But from that point, I think then after that there was a Nitro. It was a Nitro after Ultimo Dragon defeated Dean Malenko for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. Right after he just had the J Crown. So one of my first memories of wrestling when I was about 7 or 8 was Ultimo Dragon and Son come into the ring with like 9 belts at the same time, and that made me really interested because of the appeal of the mask, and that made me start being interested in why the mask, and that led to looking into Lucha Libre, and then Ultimo Dragon being with New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time as well. It got me into New Japan Pro Wrestling. Since then I started. It was easier, oddly enough, to follow New Japan and Japanese wrestling at the time. So I started just reading whatever I could about it at that time, and I've been following New Japan since mostly, and also other promotions. But New Japan was always the one that I stuck with for its history and everything. So that's kind of how I got into it. And on the writing side, I did something with PWI a couple of years ago before I became a contributing writer. And for the past about 14 months, I've been covering wrestling quite a great deal. But also my background is with news journalism and sports journalism as well. So I've been doing that since I graduated college. So a lot of journalism background in everything that I've been doing, and that's definitely helped when it comes to doing things for PWI.
Yeah. So are you a big tape trader? This obviously predates stuff like New Japan World or even YouTube. I mean, it was no easy feat back in the 90s to follow Japanese wrestling.
No, that actually is kind of funny because back then, if you were younger or a kid and you were interested in like Lucha Libre or Japanese wrestling, even some World of Sport as well, you would get a lot of flack from the older guys who were tape traders, because it's like, oh, you have the internet now, everything's easy. I was like, not really. That was still before YouTube and everything, and you just basically finding whatever clips that you could get your hands on, and you couldn't really keep up to date because things like streaming wasn't really a thing yet. So but yeah, I remember getting a lot of flack from older fans on the forum saying it's so easy for you now. I'm just like, how? I'm seeing things like 6 months after they happened and I can't do anything about it. So I was actually finding that the tape trading things were up. I never actually did that. That was a bit before my time.
Yeah. So let's talk about your interview with New Japan President Ohbari. Came in late last year, right, with the departure of Harold Mage. And what was your kind of general overall impression of him? Does he did he come off to you as a guy who has the vision and the know-how to set New Japan on the right course?
I was actually surprised with how eager he was to share information. And then one of the things that stuck out a great deal to me was the social the corporate social responsibility aspect of a lot of things that he was saying, because last year New Japan wanted to make sure they didn't run a show until it was safe, and that hurt them financially. But coming off of Wrestle Kingdom and then selling 70,000 tickets in 2 days and making somewhere around $10 million over those 2 days, they decided that it wasn't worth the risk of their fans' health and safety, and it did the New Japan Together project. And a lot of what he spoke about was that social responsibility of helping bring the world back and entertaining the world in a safe and healthy way. And so that was one of the things that stood out a lot, because that's a lot different from what you might hear from some executives within American wrestling companies. So that stuck out a lot. And a lot of their goals, his goals specifically for New Japan, and wanting to, and seeing the goal he basically says like $100 million a year in gross revenue. I thought that's doable. I mean, that's really doable, and it's something they can do, especially if they get a North American TV deal with the revenue that we've seen with WWE. Mostly how much money they get, and AEW gets nowhere near as much, but it's still a sizable amount of money to make them solvent. So that combined with their wanting to do a lot more dome shows within Japan and elsewhere, it's definitely a goal that shows they are serious about an expansion. It's not just kind of a vanity project that they're just doing to appease a few fans. It's a real long-term effort that I've heard other wrestling journalists and reporters question. But when speaking to Ohbari about it, it's definitely a goal. It's a goal-oriented thing where they're not rushing into it and trying to just pretty much hotshot what they're doing. This is a long planned out adventure that they are definitely undertaking.
And are there? Sorry, I just had a quick.
Okay, right, please.
Are there any TV outlets, U.S. TV outlets, that he may have mentioned that they have been in talks with, or they're trying to kind of get back in the game with at all? Anything specific?
No, that was the one thing. Actually, kind of funny they didn't want to talk to me about is that they do have a deal in hand with a U.S. and a U.K. TV distributor. I do not know who that is yet. I have a couple of guesses, but I probably shouldn't say them. But yeah, that's the one thing they wanted to announce on their own.
Do you have a sense, and not asking to name names, but are we talking a major TV deal? Some TV deals aren't always what they're cracked up to be, right? And certainly we saw it with TNA and Impact. After they left Spike, they bounced around, and some real small networks didn't have much of a footprint, didn't make that much of a difference in their bottom line. Is your sense that this might be something like that, maybe a startup with not as much penetration, or are we talking potentially a major cable network?
I've seen. I mean, it really depends, because if it's what I think it might be for us on the U.S. end of things, that it would be. I'm not sure how much bottom line money they would be getting from the deal, but I think it would be a lot of exposure within the United States, especially in new media. If it's something I think that is in the UK, it would be definitely a lot of exposure in the UK as well, or it might be the same brand across both of them. So I mean, there could be the possibility. What I definitely think it's going to end up doing for New Japan specifically is putting the product in front of a lot of more eyes, which is kind of what they need to do, because their product is so distinctly different from all of the other what I classify as major promotions in the world right now. It is basically sports realism. This is a sports-like product where you go and you sit there, you're watching the sport, and if you actually want to hear the conversations and afterwards, kind of just like sports, you wait until after the show and then you see those. It's not during the show, so it's so drastically different. So if fans want to see something different and they see this product, say, hey, this is different from everything else, and I like it because it's more sports based, that's kind of what they need, because that will drive people to New Japan World. That might lead to a even bigger deal later, and it'll help the wrestlers on the roster become even more popular internationally as well.
How big a part of this plan is making some real inroads in the United States. I mean, you talk about them having this goal of $100 million a year. I don't know how that compares to the revenue they're doing now. Obviously, they're coming off of, I imagine, a real challenging year because of the pandemic. But are they really sort of all in on the U.S.? Is that really kind of the main factor that they're counting on taking them to that next level?
That is definitely one of the goals, because when you look at which is very interesting, when you look at where New Japan was domestically in Japan in 1996, as far as revenue wise, all of that was their previous record revenue year prior to 2018 when they surpassed it. But in 1996, all of that revenue was domestically Japan for the most part. And now in modern times, a lot of that's coming from New Japan World fans in United States, some fans in Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, so all over the place. So they're still not anywhere near as popular as they were in Japan back then. So they still have a lot of room to build within Japan, and they can also, but he specifically did mention a lot about wanting to return to the pre-pandemic plan in the United States of pretty much building grassroots fans within the United States who are New Japan fans and not just people who watch New Japan based when it's around. So I do believe the United States is a big part of what their goal is, especially with the TV revenue. And he also, when I asked him about it, were there plans to run some of the venues that CMLL owns in Mexico, which has been a long time IWGP concession partner of theirs, he really liked that idea. So that might be something they also approach in the future when the pandemic is over.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to the Madison Square Garden show that they did with Ring of Honor over WrestleMania weekend. Did you go to that, Brian?
No, I didn't. I missed that one, but I really wanted to.
Yeah, and that was a New Japan crowd. I mean, I know Ring of Honor kind of pats themselves on the back for selling out the Garden, and they had some good action on the show. But honestly, a lot of times when there was a Ring of Honor match in the ring, that was the equivalent of the big rock band doing the B side, and everybody goes to the concessions. And maybe I'm overstating a little bit, but it was a New Japan crowd.
I thought it was all for the end zone cast run in.
Oh my God! Don't even remind me.
That everyone just pretends never happened now, I guess.
Right before a Tanahashi match in Madison Square Garden, like that.
Yeah. It was such a great experience because I mean, like. You talk about things that an American fan doesn't have much opportunity to do. I got to see an IWGP heavyweight title change in an Okada match. That was so cool. And obviously they had another a return date scheduled for last year that was another casualty of the pandemic. I saw some of the interview. He specifically mentions Madison Square Garden as a big part of this game plan, right?
Yeah. So he mentioned Madison Square Garden. I don't know the inner workings of the politics around that with the WWE, but they've somehow figured out a way around it. I don't know, but they have done that. And from what it's been released so far, they have plans to do the Wrestle Dynasty this year in 2020. It just really depends on how the pandemic is going to go in the United States and when it is no longer what it is right now. But yeah, he specifically said that the goal is to run domes within Japan and the United States. Well, what other arenas we're looking at in the United States, don't know. I do know that they have a presence within California, and there are some nice sized arenas in Los Angeles that they could look at, and Anaheim. So I mean that is a part of their goal. That's something they want to do, while also using New Japan Strong as a vehicle to get the brand out there to fans, which I was specifically told when I actually interviewed Rocky Romero that New Japan Strong isn't going anywhere even when the new TV deals start. That's a thing that they want to keep around.
What do you think the demand is and will be? Because you could have gotten a false impression of the demand, the popularity of New Japan from that Madison Square Garden show, because obviously so many things fell into place. It was WrestleMania weekend. You had hundreds of thousands of fans converging in New York, which is like the media capital of the world, on this weekend. So all the pieces were in place. But and I know it's not exactly the same, but I remember AAA also booked the Garden that same year, some months later. I think it was a Cinco de Mayo weekend, and
But they were only in the theater, though. They weren't in the
well, initially they booked the Garden proper, and they moved the theater because they just didn't sell enough tickets. And I think a lot of people saw that coming. Maybe they didn't. So outside of a WrestleMania weekend, how well do you think a New Japan does? Not just at a Madison Square Garden, but if they go try to book, I don't know, Nassau Coliseum, or just kind of, your average 10,000, 15,000 seat arena in a major metropolitan region. Do you think they sell it out pretty easy?
It really depends, because I do think that AAA example is important, because AAA hasn't really done much to even get a brand in the United States. So trying to run the Garden right after New Japan did it kind of was a bit too optimistic for what they have done in marketing themselves in the United States. I do believe. But when New Japan ran the Cow Palace, they did over 6 million, and they did the record gate for the arena at all time. So I do think it depends on what they plan on doing for a show, because if New Japan decides they want to put on a WrestleMania like event and market it as such, they can. I do believe they can sell 10,000 tickets, because even the Cow Palace show, that was. If you want to look at the top of the cards, you wouldn't even say that's probably like a Dominion show. It was kind of a little smaller. That was headed by a main event that could get people in the venue, but not the full card. So I do think if they feel like it, which I think was what they're going to do for Wrestle Dynasty, they could draw 10,000 in certain markets. They're really strong in California. They're really strong in the Northeast, it seems. So those are the two areas I would look at them running those type of events at.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about sort of the picture right now in New Japan. We're just coming off of the big Wrestle Kingdom show. Some moving pieces. What do you think of the roster they have now, and the strength of it to carry New Japan through this big expansion? Do you think that the right pieces are in place?
I do think, because New Japan, this has been the case since its inception in 1972. It's never been just a quote-unquote Japanese roster. It's always, since its beginning, has been a very multicultural roster. And I do think with pieces like, the Guerrillas of Destiny and Will Ospreay and this wrestlers from like Jay White, Bad Luck Fale, all these wrestlers from around different parts of the world, they do have the pieces in place, and they do have enough partners in place that they can help them, like CMLL. They can use wrestlers from there, and that's actually the Fantastic Mania tour is actually which was a casualty of COVID, is actually a gigantic draw in Japan. So they have so many partners and pieces in place. They're still working with Ring of Honor, despite some issues last year with the New Japan Strong brand as well. So I do think they do have the roster in place, because even since the start of the pandemic, they actually haven't had their full roster in the same place at the same time, and they're still able to draw people in Japan. And now they're adding people like Leo Rush and Fred Rosser, and people with names who actually want to work with New Japan. And I do think that's a big sign for them, and it's a great thing that they're getting these people. And Chris Dickinson, who basically was like my dream was to wrestle in New Japan, and that's what I worked for. So when they bring in all these pieces together, I do think they have what it takes to provide something different that other major wrestling promotions right now aren't doing, and that can definitely help them in the United States, and definitely in places like the United Kingdom, and even Mexico, if they do actually tour there in the future.
Barney, anything you want to
ask? Now you kind of got me on the spot there, Al. I'm sorry.
I just don't want to hog up the conversation, so feel free to jump in. Let's talk about Kota Ibushi. It was this long chase for Kota. He was the guy who was sort of on just the outside of that top tier for so long, and we've talked about here on the podcast. It's kind of a tough circle to break into. It's been dominated for so long by the Tanahashis and Okadas and Aitos of the world, Omega before that, and him just sort of on the periphery. I think some of that had to do with the inability to kind of nail him down to a contract. And once he did commit, you saw them kind of go all in. I think by any measure, a fantastic a wrestler and performer. But it's what I've always been, and WWE's gone through this, and all big companies have gone through this, is when you get a guy who is so great, and I'm talking about Okada, it's always tricky to move on from him, right? Even if you have other people on the bench who also have this huge upside. So I've always been kind of uneasy when they take that belt off of Okada. And for so long, it was always just sort of temporary. But now with another major babyface as champion, it does feel like they've kind of turned the page. So can you talk a bit about that? I mean, do you sense that they've moved on from Okada? Is it just kind of a respite? And do you think that that's still their ace, their number one guy? They know that, and eventually the title works its way back to him? Or is the situation kind of like with an Undertaker, where the thought now is you don't need him to have the title to be a top attraction?
Well, I think the best part of New Japan is where Jado and Gedo, and as far as creatively, what's important with them is that no one, quote unquote, once they get to that level, needs to be IWGP Heavyweight Champion. The belt, it's been treated so well that it's quite prestigious, and the belt can, as we saw with Evil, elevate someone to actually be able to draw. And I definitely don't think they've moved away from Okada. He's definitely probably going to be champion again. It's just the Naito he still is such a big merchandise person. He's like selling ridiculous amounts of merchandise, and so is LIJ's, that having him get a run like he did was just I do honestly believe it's just great business when you see how, just coming off the backs of Wrestle Kingdom in 2019, that they were able to just months later have another $1 million gate at the New Beginning with Naito defending against Kenta. And that's been, and what we see now is that Kenta has become quite a big attraction in New Japan, coming off the backs of what he did after Naito won and reached his goal of winning the IWGP Heavyweight Championship at Wrestle Kingdom. So I do think they do. Everything is so well in place that even if you're not a marquee talent, that even if you're someone like Yoshihashi, who's a little bit down the card, there's still a story for you. There's still a story that makes sense. There's still fans, and I do think it's a lot of what helps that is the way Japanese wrestling fans, from my interactions with them, they don't view the wrestlers as just, oh, we're going to cheer for the winners. They view them almost kind of like they're a sports team, like we're behind this person because we like this person, whether they're winning championships right now or they're struggling. And I think that helps a lot, because you see up and down the card that there's people fans get behind and they like, and they'll buy their merchandise. And I think that's great for New Japan, and it's something that can help when they do expansion as well, because from what I've seen with the Western fans that really buy in and treat it as something that's different from a more sports entertainment product, they start doing those similar things because they see it. It's not a sports entertainment product. It's a different type of professional wrestling that is more, again, geared towards the sport. So I do think we'll see people like Naito's going to still be in the title, in that IWGP Heavyweight title championship picture. Okada is, Ibushi is, Jay White's not going anywhere, even though a lot of people thought he had already left New Japan. But so I do think it's a great situation for them, because you have so many people who could be champion that it helps elevate who is champion at the time.
Yeah.
Talking about the fans, actually, I had a quick question about that, Walter. I was wondering if you had any insight on this, but I mean, would you say that even kind of like the fan base of New Japan, or the types of fans that it attracts, has changed at all? Because there was always that, people always used to say, especially American wrestlers that would go and work over there, they would talk about how different the crowds were and how different the fans were between America and Japan. Have they become more similar, would you say, or is there still that different type of audience?
That's an interesting question. I think because I do as best as I can interact with Japanese fans, and through Japanese Twitter helps with that, with the translation and my basic knowledge of certain names and everything, I can help do that. I don't think, though, the fans domestically in Japan are turning into fans that are more in the United States. Now, I don't think that's the case at all, but I do see a lot of Western fans who, again, adapt and accept that New Japan is something different, that they are becoming like those fans in Japan, because that is kind of what because that's kind of what attracts to you. That's why I think the expansion is going to be so important, because it is a sports-like product. So I think sports fans and fans that might like MMA or boxing might be attracted to New Japan because it is presented just like that almost. And you see like this, most everything's about winning or losing and that I'm better than you. And it's not more about I'm having an affair with your girlfriend who's your valet or something like that. Not to disrespect anyway, but it's more things geared towards this is a competition. I want to beat you so I can prove that I am the best type of thing. I think that's kind of what attracts a lot of new fans that want something different. And for especially Western fans who are more in it there, but I do think the Japanese fans I don't see them becoming more like fans we see in the United States at all, especially their behavior on Twitter. But that's another conversation. So
interesting though, because I think a lot of I think here in the West, as pro wrestling has kind of gone the road to more of a sports entertainment or just entertainment product, there's been a certain segment I think of fans who have kind of been attracted to other things like MMA. Like, let's say if the sports part of the presentation was what you loved the most, a lot of fans kind of converted to MMA. And so I think there's definitely a market there over here for people that are lapsed wrestling fans that, like you said, the high concept storylines and thing is maybe not what they're looking for. They're looking for something that feels more like a competition. This might be the product for them.
And actually, that's I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've had a couple of conversations in private with people, and my big thing is there is a segment of wrestling fans that say that, oh, we just need to make a specific argument I've heard, we need to make wrestling more like a comedy show, and that brings in fans. And my argument is, how popular are sports around the world? Like when you talk about things like international football, like billions and billions of dollars, biggest sport in the world, and you have like things like MMA around the world and martial arts around the world in general. Their sports are extremely a popular medium, and I do think that's where New Japan can actually grow in areas, because like as you said, I'm sure there's a lot of lapsed wrestling fans in the United States who are like, I can't do the sports entertainment thing anymore, so I'm going to go get back more into boxing or get back more into MMA and things like that. So I think that's where New Japan is actually going to have their biggest success. Maybe not so much like digging into AEW fans, even though I would imagine a lot of those are very familiar with New Japan already, or WWE fans if you're a WWE fan right now, it seems you're entrenched and you like that style with how many have already left watching the product on a weekly basis. I think that's their insight, their inroads are going to be with traditional sports fans.
But it's interesting though, because I know that's sort of the perception, right, and always has been that turn to New Japan and Japanese wrestling in general for a more sports like presentation, and here in the United States you get more of the sports entertainment. But that's evolved a lot too, right? And not just because of AEW, but you see. I think it's one of the reasons that Ring of Honor has struggled over the last few years is that the larger companies, including WWE, have kind of co-opted some of that style, right? So, and a lot of that is NXT for sure, right? I mean, you could in NXT you see a style that is reminiscent of what Ring of Honor was for all those years, and even some Japanese influence. But even the main brand, right? When you see on Raw and SmackDown, I think it's happened gradually enough that we take it for granted. But work rate just wasn't even a thing in WWE for many years. You think even to the Attitude Era, which people hold in such esteem, outside of those main events with Steve Austin and The Rock and The Undertaker and Triple H and Mick Foley, those cards were awful. You had really terrible. It was the Nation of Domination and DOA, and when they flirted with sort of athletic wrestling, like when they introduced a light heavyweight championship and like Taka Michinoku and stuff like that, they never took it serious. But now you think to what even WWE's big time presentation on Raw and SmackDown is, and it's something different. I mean, when you talk about Seth Rollins and AJ Styles and many others, a lot of who came over from New Japan, So that style, I think, has grabbed the foothold in the United States in the mainstream, and it does make me wonder: is that a threat to New Japan? Does it make it a little less special? Because that certainly happened with Ring of Honor. I think back to the first Ring of Honor shows I went to 15 or so years ago, and it was like a revelation because it was so WCW was gone. You know, the cruiserweight division was gone. It was really WWE, and I guess TNA was around there. But what Ring of Honor was doing was so different and revolutionary. And now it's hard for them to even be noticed because, you know, other wrestlers and other companies do what they do. So is that any kind of threat to New Japan as well?
I don't believe so because from what I've heard from those who still are watching WWE, most of the things I hear from former New Japan talent, they're even when we're talking about Nakamura, AJ Styles, Devitt's, like this is nothing like what they were doing in New Japan. Like I hear that a lot, and I also do think the storyline aspect of things because another common complaint I hear is that who's getting elevated in WWE. It's the same people from a decade ago. In New Japan, they bring through new talent. I mean, I think that's one thing that also came up in my interview with President Ohbari is the New Japan dojo system. They have 3 entries now, or 3 locations now, or official training centers for them, and they keep bringing in talent that is just remarkable when you see them compared to other young talent across the world. It's like they keep training these great talent, like the LA dojo right now. You got Carl Frederick, Alex Coolin, for Clark Connors, now Kevin Knight. I'm forgetting someone probably. Gabriel Kidd, and now the DKC. Like all these the guys are training with the LA dojo, and you have just a list of people in the Nohei dojo in Japan, and the Fale dojo is bringing out talent as well. So I don't think that's really going to be that itself will be the problem because there's still going to be the specific way New Japan does things that is different in presentation and different in the match style as well. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be the big issue. I think the biggest issue they'll have is how much can they get from a North American TV revenue deal eventually, and what numbers can they draw in venues in the United States? I think those are the 2 things that are happening because the venues have been decreased. Crowd sizes have been decreased in the United States over the past decade for oversaturation has been something I've heard, or maybe they're just tired of the presentation. I mean, there's definitely a lot of different things that are going into that. So I think that's going to be the biggest things. Like when they do tours, like can they get, for like what would be equivalent to a Road 2 show, can they still get like 1,500, 1,200 fans in there for that while they build up to a future event where they want to get 10K? Can they do that consistently in the United States with how the market is? I think that's going to be their biggest challenge.
The other thing that occurs to me about that is what the American presentation would be, because I remember this is probably 10 years ago or more. New Japan did run some shows, much smaller shows here in the Northeast and in New York. I didn't go to them. I tried to, but I remember they did a show like in
Evasion Attack. It's when they did the Intercontinental Championship that MVP won the tournament. Yeah,
right, exactly right. And that's what it was. It was a lot of American talent.
Right.
And the WWE struggles with this too sometimes when they go internationally. If they go to a Japan. They try to highlight some of their Japanese wrestlers, but then sometimes you hear that there's a backlash that no, the Japanese fans want the WWE product. They want the American product. They don't. Years ago when they do something like that, they'd put like a Tajiri in the main event or something like that, and fans just weren't buying it because no, that's not the WWE product. We want Triple H or something like that. So, what is the president's sort of view on that? What does he think? Does he just think that American fans want that authentic New Japan product, or are they going to try to customize it a bit, make it more American?
Well, I think what we've seen with Strong, there is a slight tweaks with Strong, but they still stay core to what New Japan is, and I do think when we're looking at how New Japan can avoid just trying to basically pretty much just give fans an quote unquote American version of the products. Now that they have the LA dojo, like you're getting trained by Shibata as a main trainer there. I mean that is New Japan. His dad was a referee in New Japan, so I mean I mean, that would be the core training, and all these young lions are, well, post pandemic they were also going to Japan and working there. So you're not so there's so when we get like young lions, they are New Japan talent. So I also think that once you have like a thing like Strong, and you see these wrestlers wrestling for New Japan, and they're not just Ring of Honor talent, that they're just working here because New Japan's doing a small tour. Is like, no, this is a weekly thing that you see these people in New Japan rings and talking about New Japan wrestlers in the main branch in Japan. So I think they're going to be able to avoid that, but they're still going to need to bring over people, like Naito is so popular in the United States, and like Okada, everyone wants to see Okada. Tanahashi, for the time he still has left as active wrestlers, like they're still going to want to see, Hiromu, who's the third highest merchandise seller in the company. You're going to bring people like that over. Ibushi, people want to see Ibushi. So I mean, like, you're going to have to, when you do these big featured shows, and maybe even some of the small ones, you're going to need to bring over those talents as well, because they're just draws. I mean, they're just draws wherever they go at this point. So I think they're going to need to make sure they do that, and just don't rely on some of the younger talent that they've built through New Japan Strong.
Yeah. Well, fascinating discussion. I could do it all day. Thank you, Walter. Definitely recommend everybody check out the digital only exclusive edition of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, featuring Walter's interview with New Japan President Ohbari. It's a whole issue dedicated to Japanese wrestling, not something we do too much. So definitely worth picking up, whether you're a big fan of Japanese wrestling or you just want to learn more about it. Definitely go check it out. Walter, thank you. Feel free to stick around. We're going to be talking some Royal Rumble. And so, Brian, let's talk a bit about that. First of all, overall, your thoughts on the show. Always one of the more fun shows of the year, if just because of the format. And I had a lot of fun watching it beginning to end.
I did too. I mean, I'm pretty much glowing about it. It's I guess I don't want to be too boring, but there's not a lot to be critical about, in my opinion, with this show. I thought it was a home run. And in fact, the Rumble matches themselves, probably, especially the women's one, which I thought was even better, although they were both strong. Probably the best finishes, the best booked finishes that I've seen in a really long time. I mean, really good stuff. And the title matches too. I thought even the McIntyre one, it was good for what it was supposed to be. I thought it was from top to bottom an incredible show. Just exactly what they needed right now.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I like the women's Rumble a little bit more than the men, but they were both a lot of fun. And we talk sometimes here about how our families, our non-wrestling fan families, are sometimes kind of a gauge of how strong a product is. And everybody in the house was having a good time watching the Rumble. So much so that the next day, my 10-year-old, who usually doesn't care about WWE at all, was anxious to watch Raw because he had so much fun watching the Rumble. And I got to kind of like tamper his expectations. And I'm like, it's not always, the Rumble. There's not always a clock counting down for somebody.
Right. They are going to have Ms. TV on this.
Yeah.
It's going to be like
But yeah, I thought it was a blast, and that they can pull this off in the circumstances that they're in. That's one thing I was wondering. It's like the pops for a surprise. How is it going to work? And I think they did a good enough job that most of the time I wasn't even thinking about it or noticing it. There were a few criticisms. Probably the one that you hear a lot is, and this is always kind of hanging over to be, the decision to go with whatever he is, 47, 48-year-old, a wrestler winning the Royal Rumble, now headlining WrestleMania in Edge. I think it was the Observer that reported that out of the 30 wrestlers in the Rumble, only 2 were under the age of 30.
And that but wouldn't we say that about most Royal Rumbles? I mean, even
certainly over the last several years, but yeah, I mean, it does speak to the direction.
I would say going back to the beginning. I mean, look, someone mentioned this to me too on Twitter, and I'm like, most wrestlers, this isn't boxing. Most wrestlers don't hit their stride till 30. They're just getting warmed up before 30. I mean, if you look at any of the greats, the best years that they usually have are in their 30s. So it's just a puzzling thing to me. And I do have some thoughts about the Edge win, if I could take up a couple
please.
on that. And I am fully behind it. And I thought it was a great idea, even the execution of it, but even the concept behind it. Because look, it doesn't hold water with me now when people are always saying, well, this is terrible. It's the same old people. They're not making new stars. They haven't built up anybody. And I'm like, okay, I get it. We haven't had maybe a John Cena, fine. But there's, every member of the Shield has been turned into main event talent. One of them isn't even with them anymore. You had Becky Lynch. You had, Drew McIntyre, for God's sake, he won it last year. People are talking about, oh, it's the same old. They just did it last year where they took a mid-carder, potentially a lower mid-carder, and instantly made them a main event. So I mean, those same criticisms don't really hold water for me anymore. And as far as with Edge, this is a very different story right now. If you look at it from a storytelling point of view, it's not like Edge has been here for the past 10 years, winning everything. Everybody's getting tired of him. It's not like Randy Orton winning it. I mean, that would have been an abomination. I was so glad when he didn't. But this is now a comeback story. This is Rocky Balboa 2006, right? This is like the comeback. Can he do it? It's inspirational. Can he pull it off? I think that's a great story to tell. I mean, I'm all for making new stars, but sometimes something like this is the right story to tell. And that they're teasing how I guess he could face any, champion he wants. And there was talk now of him showing up on NXT. Now, I don't know if this is a tease to just build interest and, he's going to wind up picking one of the big two champions. But I think if you want to elevate the NXT title into a legit third world title, not third world, but third world championship, if you want to elevate it and sort of pacify some of the people who are like, all right, we don't want to see Edge like in the main event. That's a brilliant idea. Edge for the NXT title at WrestleMania, that elevates that title tremendously if you do that. I don't know if they're going to do it because I did hear he was going to show up on NXT, but I think it's great. I mean, the finish, anytime I pop for something, I hate to sound so cynical, like I've seen so much and I've worked there and everything. If I pop for it, I feel like something worked. And when Edge dumped out Orton at the end, I jumped out of I can't even tell you on this podcast what I said, but it was a word that starts with F, followed by U, Randy Orton. Okay. That's how excited I was to see that, because I felt like, oh, they're going to do this thing again where it's like, oh, you get all excited and then it's Randy Orton. He's been outside the whole time, but he's not eliminated. Oh, he's going to win. Oh, no, he's not going to win. Like that was such a great moment, I thought. I mean, I don't know. I'll criticize something when I feel like there's a reason to criticize it. But something like that, I feel like, I don't know. Those are like people that tell kids there's no Santa Claus, Come on.
Yeah, I'm largely with you. I can't think of who else I would have wanted to win it more. I mean, I guess Daniel Bryan was the other one who people were picking, and there was a storyline there as well. Not that he's much younger either. But you could still go that route. You could still do something with Daniel Bryan, and I think he did fine. I think I would have been disappointed, like you would have been, if it was Orton, if only because I don't see what the match is there. But yeah, there are some real intriguing possibilities with Edge. And one thing for better or for worse, when you think about, we're discussing a project, a WrestleMania related project for an upcoming issue, talking about WrestleMania dream matches that we didn't see in the past. And those dream matches always were, one iconic wrestler from one generation versus the current generation's iconic wrestler. And we haven't been able to do that for a while now. And Edge was not the top guy, even during his run, but he was a top guy. He was a multiple-time world champion. The pool of those types of wrestlers to choose from is pretty shallow. It used to be, WrestleMania is like, who could we bring back from the past? There, you've got a Goldberg, and we saw how that went. But you're right. I mean, with Edge, relatively fresh. We haven't seen him in a long time. Can absolutely still go. You're right. I think the story that they told on that night and the story that they could tell going forward is worth it. If there was this wasn't like a 2014 where you had Daniel Bryan and everybody wanted to see Daniel Bryan win it and they put it on Batista. I don't know who that other guy would have been. I mean, could you have made a star like you did with Drew McIntyre last year? I don't even know who that would have been. Keith Lee is a guy maybe some folks were pulling for. I don't think was even available, obviously, for the Rumble. But yeah, I think I'm fine with it. As far as what you do with him, right? So you've got Roman Reigns, you've got the NXT Championship, or Drew McIntyre. Would your pick be the NXT Championship, or of the three, which one would you like to see the most?
Well, I mean, initially when he first won, and I'm running it through my head, I'm thinking, okay, this would be a natural for Roman Reigns, because, and not just because it's face and heel, but it's like, here he is. He's this bully. He's this awful, this is my time now. And it would be the perfect angle where you've got the sentimental favorite from the past and, Reigns being very sort of dismissive of that. I think that could really work. I'm just saying, when I saw mention, and they teased it on Twitter with Edge, and he posted a logo of NXT, and he just wrote, and I think it went up today or yesterday. That actually got the wheels turning in my head, where I said, that's a pretty cool idea, where it's like, that really builds up that title and maybe keeps him out of those main events if you want to have other fresh people in there. I don't know. I mean, I would have to say, as a match, I would still prefer to see the Roman Reigns angle and match. I think that would be really compelling, but I do see the benefit of maybe using all of this to help elevate the NXT title. To the fact that the winner of the Rumble would choose to go after that belt, that makes that belt very important. But as far as the actual match, I think I'd still prefer to see Reigns. I think that would be great.
I don't think he does much for NXT. We saw them do this basically last year with Charlotte, and she picked the NXT champion. And, I think it ended up probably getting more of a negative backlash than anything else, in part because she beat Rhea Ripley and then, kind of had her way with the women's division on NXT for a few months, and then just kind of left, and Rhea never kind of reclaimed that glory. I sort of feel like a similar thing could happen here, where NXT might pull down Edge more than Edge would elevate the brand. Even though I think I say go ahead and do Edge Balor anyway. I mean, do it on TV or something. It'd be fun to watch, even if it's non-title. But yeah, I think the match is Roman Reigns, and it pretty much for what you laid out. The McIntyre match, I think it's just tougher with two baby faces.
Now they have Sheamus in there, where they're doing like the Hulk Hogan, Paul Orndorff thing now.
Sure, yeah, but I assume that they're good. I mean, do you think they're doing McIntyre and Sheamus at WrestleMania? I can't imagine. I think
unless it's just going to be kind of like what is?
Well, they've got a pay-per-view or two before then.
Yeah, Elimination Chamber, is it? I think.
And they got Fastlane, I think they're doing. So
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to just wait until right before the show to shoot an angle. But if it were me, I would be thinking from now.
Yes.
Start the angle, for your champion going to Mania. But I don't know. I guess they have been known to do that, so it could be. We don't know yet. Yeah, but it's just not. I think it would be a good match, but there's not a lot to hang on to there. What's the angle there? I don't know.
And what WWE struggles with so much over the last decade plus is telling those good guy versus bad guy stories, where you're really cheering on the good guy and you really hate the bad guy. And with Reigns and Edge, I do think they have two performers who are sort of uniquely suited to tell that story. I mean, if there's a crowd, and then I guess there's going to be some kind of crowd in Tampa for WrestleMania, you've got to think that they're going to be 100% behind Edge and 100% booing Reigns. I mean, and that is a set of circumstances that WWE has, does not come by easy. So I think they should cheer. How do you book that match? First of all, what happens?
Well, I heard that they were going to let in, because it's a huge stadium.
Yeah, I guess and there's two nights.
They're going to let in 20,000 people. I heard. So
I hope to be one of them.
Which is, still like a fifth of the way to fill it, so that seems feasible, I guess. But I mean, all right, so how I book it is, the thing is, I'm thinking in my head, this is this could very well be because they couldn't get Rock. It's the idea of like somebody from the past, a big name, putting Reigns over and like elevating him even further. But I think this is a very different kind of story because Rock, it's not really a comeback story if it's Rock. It's not like a sentimental story because he's like the biggest star in Hollywood. He's got all of his swagger and cockiness. Like it would be more like him kind of insulting Roman Reigns for 2 months and laughing at him. This is more like the underdog story of, you're an old man now, you're broken down. I'm at the head of the table. You're not going to take my spot. And I'm going to like throw some of my flunkies at you. And along the way, maybe he faces Jey Uso in February, they do something with that and build it that way. Like this is your time has passed kind of a thing. And I'm not the same person that you knew. They could even go that route too, because I don't know if they have any history at all. Because pretty much by the time he came up, Edge was already gone. Like even when he was in Florida Championship Wrestling, I think Edge was pretty much gone. But they could always manufacture something if they wanted to. That he had changed so much. But Reigns is the bully. As simple as that. Yeah. Reigns is the big evil bully who has no respect for the legacy of Edge and couldn't care less about his wife and his kids and just thinks that he is pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, you used the term before, dismissive, and I was thinking the same thing. I mean, he could just kind of thumb his nose at the whole, storyline, the whole inspirational comeback of Edge. So I think it can make for great TV. So I'm excited to see it play out if that's the direction they take, and it looks like they will. Any thoughts on what you do with McIntyre at WrestleMania? I mean, I think John Cena would be great. I guess Cena is sort of, throwing water on that whole idea, talking about he can't get away from his set shooting Peacemaker in Canada. I don't know how much of that is legit, how much of that is a work. I don't see another. What terrifies me is Bray Wyatt being added to this conversation, because to me that's just death. But Cena McIntyre, I think, would be a lot of fun.
It's face versus face, which my only concern with that is I think with big face versus face matches, I don't feel like you can do them with just anybody. Like they really have to be larger than life. Like Cena and Rock worked, and Hogan Warrior, Hogan Rock, things like that. There's nothing against Drew McIntyre. I just don't know if he's transcendent enough to be able to carry a match like that. Because I think if they do that, I actually think, for as much flack as Cena always took, I think Cena is the huge fan crowd favorite if you do a match like that. I really just feel like it could wind up hurting McIntyre's. I don't know. I probably want to go a different way, although I'm not sure what. I mean, definitely not Sheamus, though. I mean, I'm really hoping that's not the plan. But
yeah, I don't see who the Keith Lee could they elevate? You deal with the babyface problem, but yeah.
Rollins is Rollins back as a face now? No, he's
not. But they did it. I mean, I guess you could do it. It would be a fine match. It doesn't feel like a real marquee WrestleMania match. Right. They did it already, so we'll see. Let's talk about the women's Royal Rumble. Bianca Belair winning it. I thought she was a good choice to win it. I thought she did fantastic. She's just a lot of fun to watch, really unique. And I love the athleticism. I love just kind of her spunkiness. And the criticism about the men's Rumble going to the 48-year-old, old timer, that kind of thing. Offset for sure over on the women's side, where they went with this new act and somebody with a tremendous upside who is still young. What do you do with her? It sounds like WWE's maybe not even sure what that match is. Is there something that's obvious for you?
Well, it's Sasha Banks, right? I mean, has that been?
They haven't said officially. No, I mean, I guess it would be Sasha Banks or Asuka at the moment. Could she also, I guess, go and challenge Io Shirai? I don't see that happening. I mean, she's just coming up from NXT, so I guess there was an interview somewhere where she made it clear that I guess her preference would be Sasha Banks, and part of that would be, I guess, the historical significance historical significance of two African American women fighting at WrestleMania for the women's championship. Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
I think they're and it seems to me anyway like they might be building some heat between Asuka and Charlotte. So I'm thinking that might wind up being that women's title match for Mania. I'm hoping that they don't do a triple threat. I mean,
I was just thinking that because where does Bayley fit in? And
right.
you know, like we talked about, it feels like there's some unfinished business between Bayley and Sasha. So,
well, I think that you don't want to. I'm usually against triple threat matches, but in this case specifically, I don't think you want to water it down. I mean, she had a great moment. It's a great achievement. She's a challenger, meaning Bianca Belair. If you just throw her in a triple threat, I just think it kind of, I don't know, what am I? It kind of brings it down a little bit. Yeah. It kind of lessens the significance of her win. Like I've always said that one of the things I wish they did more with the Rumble that they really have never done. I mean, they did it with McIntyre now and they did it with Belair, which is instead of just always having it won by somebody who was in the running for a title shot anyway, because they're a perennial main eventer every year. So, you know, it's going to be one of like 5 people. Use it as a way to elevate a mid-card talent who is maybe nowhere near the title picture. Like use it as a tool. And they did that way back when they first started using the title match thing with the Rumble with Yokozuna.
Yeah.
And now they did it last year with McIntyre, who came out of nowhere. And I wouldn't say Bianca Belair was nowhere. Certainly she wasn't like a Drew McIntyre, but they took somebody who really could benefit from that. And the finish was amazing because I don't know about you, but I'm watching it literally, honestly, truly, not knowing who was going to win, thinking it could be either one of them. It could be, the last 2 I'm talking about. It could have been Rhea Ripley or Bianca Belair. Like it could have been either one of them. And you don't usually get that. You usually, a lot of times you get like, oh, get it over with already. Like we know it's not going to be this guy. We know it's not him. And this time, and they really like drew it out, the suspense of it back and forth, like the spot where they're both hanging off the apron and they're trying to they both sort of make the mutual agreement to roll back in so that they don't both fall out at the same time. Yeah. Like you're really going, who is actually going to win this thing? It was really great. I loved. That was the highlight of the night for me. And I was pulling for her through the whole thing. So I was hoping she would win it.
Did you see a frame grab, a screen grab?
I saw.
It's out there of their feet touching, or it seems like her feet touched. And in that moment when I saw it, I thought I noticed it, but it's like, my eyes playing tricks on me kind of thing.
It must have been really quick because I was watching closely for that. I was going like, are the feet gonna touch? First of all, I don't think it was intentional. Well, I mean, even the Shawn Michaels one wasn't intentional either. They had to like sort of like retcon it to make it seem like.
You're saying not even one foot was supposed to touch for Shawn,
right? With Shawn Michaels, I don't believe he was supposed to touch at all. And when one of his feet touched, they had to come up with that clause of like, which had never been mentioned before, that both feet have to touch the floor. But that was literally just because he screwed up. So I think in this case, I think it was the same thing. But I'm not thinking they're going to make anything out of it because if they were,
I don't think so either.
They would have already.
The other one was The Rock and Big Show back in 2000. Remember? And in that case,
have wasn't there one with Batista where Vince tore his quad where they both went out?
Right. Well, now that one, I guess somebody was supposed to touch first, and they actually that I got to say, out of all like wrestling folklore, I don't know if I buy that because it was just so perfect how they went over at the exact same time. Right. I have a hard time accepting that wasn't supposed to happen.
Well, Edge told the story. I mean, again, that could be a work too, but Edge told the story in like a shoot interview or something of Vince being incredibly pissed backstage. And that was partly why he tore his quad was he was like, he usually has that crazy walk, but he was like so angry that the crazy walk was like to the 10th power.
Yeah.
And he wound up like injuring both of his legs.
What a weird night. Yeah.
I tend to think that part of that was not supposed to happen. I was there at the time and I don't remember hearing that it was worked. And usually we would be told things like that, but you never know.
And obviously when they did it planned years prior to that with Brett and Luger, right. I think they even had to be careful shooting it because in that case they were supposed to touch together, but they couldn't be sure that they would touch together. So, there was definitely a little sloppiness by WWE's production team on Sunday. And surprisingly so, Bianca's feet touching is something that should not have been caught on camera. Easy for me to say, from over here, obviously. But whenever I watch the Rumble, it is just it's mind-blowing how they pull these things off, right? I mean, it really is sort of WWE at its most impressive because especially when you compare it to like those early Rumbles where it was pretty paint by the numbers, the eliminations, and I think in part because of Shawn and just as sort of, the athleticism has evolved over the years, they do more and more with the near eliminations, and now it's in both the men's and women's, it's throughout the whole match, and it just takes the smallest thing to go wrong and your whole match could be ruined, right?
I mean, the biggest thrill of the earlier Rumbles, where you wouldn't see so many of those types of things, would be the idea, which you see less of now, I think, the idea of faces fighting faces and heels fighting heels.
Axe and smash, working.
Yeah, or like I remember, I was a kid and seeing like Hulk Hogan tossing Jimmy Snuka out. I was like, what is happening? I can't believe in anything anymore. Like you'd see things like that. You don't see that as much anymore. Now it's more about, like you said, like the elimination spots themselves.
Yeah.
Kofi Kingston phenomenon.
Right. Which there wasn't anything, and I think it's fine.
Who's the one who? Was it?
That was Bianca and Naomi with. There was that was actually a neat spot where Naomi used Bianca's hair to pull herself back up. I thought that was really cool.
Right. But there was another one. Somebody got caught by somebody. I'm drawing a blank now. God, who's the person with the sommelier now?
Carmella.
Carmella, right. He caught her, and he's holding her, and he puts her back in.
You're right. Yes, there was some of that. Yeah, that's the thing. So much happens in the Rumble that you forget some of the stuff. I remember like at the end of the night when I was live tweeting, I talked about like with the women's Rumble, it was low on sort of nonsense and high on suspense. And then people pointed out like what, Jillian Hall and the 24/7 championship, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That's stuff.
I like that. I'm sorry.
I thought it was fun. Yeah,
my dad loved that. My dad is not like an avid wrestling. He comes over for the big shows. And he got a huge kick out of that, as I'm sure a lot of other casual people watching it did. The idea that, like, in the middle of the match, all of a sudden there's another title changing hands. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a little bit of something for everybody. So, absolute thumbs up. A heck of a fun show. A real quick, the two world title matches, Goldberg and Drew McIntyre. Drew makes basically short work of him. I think most people agree that's about what you were going to do with that match. It does feel like the Goldberg experiment is starting to lose some luster, right? So, what do you do with him? And is there a role for him at WrestleMania? Do you need to just kind of put him away for a while?
Yeah, I mean, why do you have to do anything with him? I mean,
because he's in good shape and he's got some name value, and I don't think he means even what he did a year ago, and probably will mean less. I think if you're going to use him at all, now you have to essentially kind of put in the tomato cans in front of him and rebuild them. I liked one of my favorite things they've done with Goldberg over the last few years was him and Dolph Ziggler a few years ago at SummerSlam. I think it was the opening match, and he killed him, and then Dolph protested, and so he killed him again and beat him again, and then Dolph protested again. That yes, that's what you do with Goldberg. It's tough because they keep on putting him in these big match spots against much younger opponents, and then you've got to you're in this constant sort of like conundrum of like, well, how do we book our way out of this? We can't have him win, we can't have him lose, and that's if you're going to do something with a Goldberg, I think it's got to be several rungs down on the card at this point.
And I don't know if he even works that way.
And what's the point at that point? Yeah,
it'd be like, I know that usually happens, obviously, with top talent as they become sort of the guys putting people over and mid-carders and stuff. But there's some people that you just don't buy that with. Like here, I'll appeal to you with this one. Could you imagine if he had stuck around long enough and not imploded, eventually the Ultimate Warrior doing that role? I mean, he just wouldn't have worked. Like the Ultimate Warrior in the middle of the card, like jobbing to some random guy. Like
I'm saying if you're going to use Goldberg in the mid-card, put him in positions where he could go over. And that's tricky too, because now you're beating your younger, newer talent.
He becomes like a Mick Foley, where it's like he's a person who You're banking on the legacy of what they've done and the respect they have from fans. You're using them to get over a young talent. But if that's all they do, then their value's gone because people see through it. Like that's the road that also Jericho was going down before he went to AEW, of just like how much juice could we get out of this guy putting over young talent until the fans see through what we're doing. Like that's kind of what's starting to happen now with Goldberg. You're not going to get the same returns. And I just don't see the value of it anymore. I mean, he's almost 60, right? He's pushing 60.
54, I think. So and then the added complication with him is that he can't do a whole lot, right? So you're not only worrying about sort of the optics of if he beats this guy or anything like that, but it's also how do we book this? It's got to be short. He can't do this. He can't do that. He can't do this. He can't do that. And you're kind of to have something that isn't a train wreck. It's got to be really short, high impact, spear, and that gets kind of old too. So there's just you're not just because of his age and kind of his place in the business, but because of his actual physical abilities, you're so limited as to what you can do. I know he was lobbying for a match with Roman Reigns, which was supposed to be one of the main events of WrestleMania last year. I hope they just put that idea to bed at this point, right? I mean, you just that a window is closed. I think you just can't do it, right?
Yeah, and it didn't even seem like Reigns wanted that. He made a couple of comments about that a year ago. I don't know if they were just meant to be in character or not, where he was just sort of like, yeah, that's not really something that I would want to do. Especially now with the Edge thing, because then if Goldberg gets Reigns, then that means Edge is going to get McIntyre. And I think you didn't just wind up with two lackluster main events.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. As for the Roman Reigns, Kevin Owens match, a lot of fun until, I guess, kind of a disastrous ending, right?
Yeah, well, look, you always hear that the referees are told, okay, the onus is on the wrestlers, so you have to call what you see. You don't want to expose the business. You don't want to make it look bad. So even if that means now and then, like somebody gets pinned who's not supposed to get pinned, you can't just stand there and not count a pinfall if somebody's on top of somebody, right? You just have to do it. Now, I think in this case, probably because the match is so high profile and it's a main event, it's the world title and all this, that there was pressure, and I don't know who's in the referee's earpieces or whatever, but when I saw this coming a mile away, I'm like, what the hell happens if Heyman can't unlock those hands?
And it was in such an awkward position near the floor, behind a pillar. It is that keyhole was not easy to access.
Well, two things about that. And I feel silly having to say this because I'm not like I'm like this brilliant booking genius or something. But number one, how about not actually locking the handcuffs?
Yeah.
so you don't run into that. How about, like those trick magic ones where there's like a button you hit and they open? Number one. And number two, there's such an easy out, right? Because you had the referee who's about to count to 10 in the first place, the first time he got locked. And what does Reigns do? He grabs the referee, knocks the referee out, right? So in the heat of the moment where you've got Heyman there and the directive should have been, Paul, if you can't get those handcuffs unlocked in time and the ref is counting, then you deck the referee. That's the move right there. Heyman gets up, decks the referee. Problem solved. Now he can sit there for 10 minutes trying to unlock those things. And it only puts more heat on Heyman and Reigns, and it doesn't make it look stupid, Yeah. I mean, it's a small thing for that huge card, which was a really good show. But yeah, that was definitely a big blooper for sure. That was the kind of thing you don't want to see. You don't want to see.
There needs to just be a moratorium on anything with like keys and locks, because since the beginning of WWE, there have been issues, and it goes back to the 80s where they'd have cage match and somebody would padlock the cage door shut, and inevitably somebody was fumbling with the keys and you can't quite lock it. And
I was getting
nervous. Play dumb.
I was so nervous watching Heyman crouch.
And in this case, you actually have like this clock ticking, right? Like you've got 10 seconds to do it.
And I'm going, Paul Heyman is not the most athletic person. This is probably the most physical exertion he's had in a really long time. And I'm getting nervous. I'm getting nervous like I'm in Gorilla watching it. I'm going like, oh my God, please let him be able to unlock these handcuffs.
Yeah. The other thing that occurred to me like right at the moment was, why are they doing this live? because this was a circumstance, and I assume that whole a portion of the match that was like backstage where they had the other ring with the forklift and all that. I assume that was all taped. I don't know that it was, but I certainly, that was my conclusion watching it. And really, even with the Thunderdome stuff, they could do a lot of stuff taped and have, because I didn't realize until recently that like the Thunderdome digital fans that they had been using for NXT for a long time were just repurposed a video from other Thunderdomes.
Really?
Yeah, I guess so. And I know that because I've signed up for the Thunderdome a couple of times, and I would never get the invite for an NXT show. It was always only Raw or SmackDown, and I guess that's what I heard, is that they just grab video from the other shows and put them on NXT. So with something like this, where there was so many kind of moving pieces and everything had to go right, I was surprised. I mean, again, one of the luxuries of this pandemic is like, yeah, you can tape that. You can get that exactly right. There's no need to do that live and risk that. But hindsight's 2020. Anyway, I agree. This is all nitpicky stuff. A really fun show. One of the more fun WWE shows in a long time. So, and you start getting that kind of excitement over WrestleMania. So. Yeah. All right, Brian, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I don't know if Walter's still there. Thank Walter again for joining us. Pick up the special Japanese exclusive edition of PWI digital format. And that's it. We'll be back soon. Take care, everybody.